Hello, my name's David Baldry. I'm a Senior Principal Solutions Engineer with Marklogic. Today I'm going to be talking about installing and also contributing to our Envision project. There's another video all about using Envision. This particular video won't go into much detail about Envision itself. It's going to concentrate, as I say, on installing Envision and also how you would develop or contribute to the Envision project. What I'm going to be doing is installing Marklogic, installing Quick Start, and installing Envision, and then looking at how you can use the Envision source code to contribute to the Envision project. I'm going to be using an Apple Mac, but if you're using a Windows PC, it's a very similar process. There are several ways to install Marklogic. You could use Docker Hub, if that's your thing. Or alternatively, what I'm going to do is to download Marklogic and install it locally on my Mac. To do that, you can access this Try Free button on our home web page, and then access the Marklogic server free download. And you can then download the required files for the operating system you're using. You won't need any of the optional converters or the machine learning models for what I'm going to be doing with Envision. To save time, I've already downloaded the files that I need, and I've put them into this MLTV folder on my desktop. To install Marklogic server, I can double-click on the Marklogic 10 installation file, double-click on the package, and then install Marklogic. Note that the page where you download Marklogic from also has a link to a systems requirements page, which will be worth having a read through, and also the installation procedures, which is basically what I'm going to be going through on this particular video. In my case, the procedures for the macOS, which are described here. Once Marklogic has been installed, we can start the Marklogic server. And then if you follow the documentation, it will tell you to go to localhost and the port 8001, which is the default port for the admin user interface. I can now install the initial databases and application servers. And then Marklogic will automatically restart and will be up and running. It'll ask me if I want to join a cluster. Now in this case I'm just running a single node of Marklogic on my MacBook, so I can skip that section. And here I can configure the admin user accounts that I want to use to log into the system. Once I've done that and changed the admin user account, the system will ask me to authenticate using that account. And once I've done that, you'll see our admin user interface. And if you're familiar with Marklogic, you'll know that we can also access on port 8000 the query console tool, which allows me to invoke commands and create content and see content that's already there in the databases. Next thing I want to do is install the Data Hub Quick Start. To do that, I can come back to the marklogic.com website, select Try Free again, and this time we'll do the free download of the Data Hub. And then you can download the Quick Start file from this link. To save time, I've already downloaded the file, and I can just run it from the command line like so. System will start, and then it tells me that I can access Quick Start by the port 8080. So I can come into a new tab, access that particular port. System will prompt me for a project folder. So I'll keep the default here, which is just the location of the Quick Start jar file. I can now change various settings. In this case, I'll just initialize everything, select Next, log in, using the admin account I created earlier on, and then I can initialize the data hub. Now, while I'm doing this, if I go back to my file explorer, you'll see here various directories have been created up. These are the directories that will be populated once I create entities and flows and mappings and so on and so forth. Whilst the data hub initializes, you'll also note if I go back to the data hub page, we have a link to some install notes and documentation for the quick start. It's worth noting these prerequisites. I've already got these installed, but you will need these installed if you're going to use quick start. So you need a Java JDK version 8, Marklogic server, which we installed earlier, and Gradle 4.6. Once the data hub has finished installing, we can click finished. And then here you'll see 14 documents already exist in staging. If I browse to that data, you'll see those documents are just default documents. They're not ones that I've loaded. They're just default ones that come with the data hub. The next thing I want to install is Envision itself. To do that, I can come back to the Marklogic website and select the search option, type in Envision, and you should see this article in the tools area about Envision. I can select that and then view the GitHub repository for Envision. This is the source code we'll look at in a moment, but if you're just interested in using Envision as an end user, then you can just download this Envision jar file. Again, I've already done that. And then you can read this documentation as to how you actually start Envision. In my case, because I'm running Envision from the same folder that my data hub is installed in, I can just do java -jar and then the Envision jar file. Envision will then start. It'll tell me that Envision is running on port 9003, which I can then go to my web browser and access Envision. Again, I log in as admin, and Envision is up and running. Envision and QuickStart use the same entity model. So within Envision, I could come here and add an entity for, say, person. And I can add a property of the person's full name. And if I go back into my data hub, look at the entities, you see here that entity has been created with the full name. Equally in here within QuickStart, I can do a new entity. So I'll say here we've maybe got a company entity, and we can create that. And then maybe I want to go to my person entity, and I can edit that, and I can add an additional property, which is that the person, we'll say, works for a company, and we'll say you can work for many companies. Save that. So I'm developing my entity model here in QuickStart in this case. But as I say, it's the same entity model that Envision uses. So once I've created it here, I'll be able to go into Envision and see the same entity model. So popping back into Envision, hitting refresh, and here's that entity model, this time in Envision. So what if you're a developer and you want to customize this experience? Or even better, if you want to contribute some of your customizations back to the Envision project? Well, you can do that. You go back to the Envision GitHub page. You'll see here we have a contributing document that explains how to go about downloading the source code of Envision. What we'll actually do is fork the project on GitHub, create a new branch. First of all, actually check to see whether any issues have been created similar to the ones you're looking to be developed. You can always ask questions in there of the project maintainer just to make sure that something you're planning on developing is in line with where we're thinking of taking the Envision project, because there's nothing more frustrating in spending a lot of time developing something which really doesn't align with the rest of where the project is going to. So it's worth checking, having a conversation on the issue tracker, but then you can follow these instructions to go ahead, branch and implement a customization, and then contribute that back to the overall community, and then we will potentially add that back in to the Envision system itself. So if you want to follow this approach and contribute things, there's also a developing document here which explains how to go about actually running Envision in developer mode. So in order to run in developer mode, what I will do is just cancel out of my running of Envision here as a normal end user where I ran the jar file. I will change into the directory where I've downloaded my source code. Envision is based on the Grove stack. Grove generally allows you to have a middle tier, which is either a Spring Boot application or a Node.js application. And the front end can either be React or Vue. With Envision, we're using a Spring Boot middle tier, and we're using Vue.js for the front end. Within Vue.js, we're using Vuetify for the design elements and Vuex for state management. To run the middle tier, I can run the Gradle commands that I need, which you see here. So what I'm specifying here is the Data Hub directory, and I'm specifying the task that I want to run, in this case, boot run. So that will run the Spring Boot middle tier. So I can then do a second tab. To run the front end code, there's another task called run UI. So I can just do Gradle, run UI, and this will start the Vue.js environment. While this is starting, I can just start a code editor, in this case Visual Studio Code, just have a brief run through of the code. Personally, I normally use IntelliJ if I'm doing anything in the Java middle tier, and instead of running the boot run command as I've done, I could actually debug within IntelliJ. Many people within Marklogic were using Visual Studio Code a lot these days, particularly because there's a really good Marklogic debugger that is now available within Visual Studio Code. See here, my system has started, and again I can log in. This time I'll see the same entity model. I'm just logged in this case as a developer rather than running the individual jar file. Now Envision is a typical Vue.js application. If you want to go in and modify it, then please feel free to do so. We're using a testing framework called Cypress to do tests, and if you do add any customizations, we'd encourage you to look at the specs we've developed for Cypress for other tests and model your own tests based on the existing tests. But it's a typical Vue.js application. I can go in here into my router if I wanted to do something like add a new page. So where we have connect, explore, no, might want to add a new page, for example. Then I've got my router.js file, and I can come in here and choose, just use maybe this section where I've got no as a template, replace that, add my own page. The Vue files themselves are in the Vue folder, so I'd also need to create a new .vue file, and then implement the functionality that I want. If you're a Vue.js developer, then you'll know what to do. Envision is very typical of a normal Vue.js project. So that's the end of this short video. I've gone through installing Marklogic, installing Quick Start, installing Envision, and using Envision both as a end user where you just run the jar file, and also using it as a developer where you run the separate middle tier and front end code. Thank you very much.